So today we are going to take a look at Atomic Habits by James Clear with a very nice looking cover. This book, as you might suspect, is about habits and habit formation. It's one of my favorite self-help books. It's probably the one I'm most likely to recommend in a general sense, especially for people who don't read nonfiction, where because of accessibility reasons it's a bit of an easy read as well. We're going to kind of summarize the main ideas of the books here. I'm going to perform a critique of an idea I think James Clear gets very wrong, which is part of my general critique of self-help books in general. And then we're going to get into the ratings and why I think the ratings are what they are. So starting off, this book is about, a sort of practice. It is a practice-oriented book where the whole goal is to build habits, and his kind of overall central thesis in the book is that small, little, tiny improvements done consistently over time produce enormous results, which is a sort of thesis that I agree with, although I disagree with kind of the way he explains it a little bit. We'll talk about that later. But in it, he sort of creates a model, and he comes back to it repeatedly throughout the book. This is one of the things that's great about the book, is there's a ton of visual aids. And anyone who's followed me for some times knows I really, really like visual aids. And this is sort of his summary he puts in at the end of each chapter. And he slowly fills it out. Let's find a different chapter where you can see a less filled out version of it. So here's a much less filled out version of the same sort of chart that he has. And his idea is you have to... I lost my page. There we go. And his idea is we have to both be good at making good habits, be good at making bad habits, and all of the sort of corollaries of the two are, or how should I say, what makes for making a good habit, the reverse of it makes for making a bad habit. So we have the first law. By his invocation of laws is a little reminiscent of, Robert Greene's 48 Laws of Power, because he talks about the law and then the reversal, which is the same language Robert Greene uses, but let's get into it. The first law is you make it obvious, and so in doing this, you have to try and make the habit, or when you should engage in the habit, as obvious to yourself as possible. Examples of when you can do this is implementation intentions. I believe he covers this in this book. I'm not 100%, I don't 100% remember. He names habit scorecard. Write down your current habit and in order to become aware of it. And he does use implementation intentions. I will do X behavior at X time at X location. Use habit stacking, which is an idea I think he might have come up with. I'm not 100% sure. Design your environment. Make the cues good habits of obvious and visible. So an example for this is, when you go to grocery stores, I'm not sure if he covers this in the book, but in grocery stores, they put, all of the brands that they really want you to buy, the name brands, at eye level, and all the cheaper stuff at the bottom shelf. And just what shelf something's on will make you more likely to purchase it or even eat it. So something you could do is you could put the junk food on the bottom shelf in your house, which makes it less obvious, which of course is the reversal of the bad habit. Make it invisible, which is the inversion of the first law, or he uses the word inversion. The second law is make it attractive. You want to use temptation and sort of building material. He mentions creating a motivation ritual, joining a culture where this is the case. And then the inversion, of course, is make it unattractive. You reframe your mindset is the way he articulates it. The third law is make it easy. Reducing the friction that you have and the number of steps you have in order to make the habit. He also talks about priming the environment, mastering the decisive moment, this sorts of stuff. The 2-minute rule is one that is found in quite a few self-help things, which is downscale your habits until they can be done in 2 minutes or less. And so if you are first putting in a habit, like let's say you want to write more often, something you can do is you can set a timer for 2 minutes and you say, okay, every day I'm going to write for 2 minutes, and then I can keep writing if I want to. I don't have to keep doing it. And this is a much easier habit to implement. It is also, by the way, obvious in the sense that when you have accomplished it. Or, well, that's not what he means by obvious when he uses obvious, but I think that's a good heuristic for your habit, is you should know when you have successfully completed what it is you're trying to do. And of course, the corollary of this is make it difficult, or the inversion of the third law. An example he gives is, if you want to not attend to your phone as much, you can put it in another room, especially when you are trying to be productive. And the fourth law is make it satisfying. And he has reinforcement, using a habit tracker, just being able to X the things off is psychology. Like, there are studies that indicate just Xing stuff off is a nice reward in terms of dopamine for your system. And of course, the inversion is make it unsatisfying. And this is kind of, let's see if it'll focus here. And you can see all of this here, more or less. So this is kind of, his overall model is very, very simple, very, very clear. He supplies good evidence for it and these sorts of things. And this is kind of why this makes it my favorite self-help book. I don't think that the ideas are the craziest or the most out there. A lot of them are stuff that you can discover readily in other self-help books or psychology books or these types of things. This is not why I think it's my favorite, but it is his overall organization and presentation of, I think, good and important ideas is just incredible. And so this is why I think this is my favorite self-help book. But there's something I'm critical of, and I'm critical of self-help in general, and that is his 1% improvement spiel, which he gives at the front, which is, hey, look, if you improve 1% every day, this is the type of graph you're going to see. You're going to see exponential improvement over the course of the year. And at the end of a year, you will 37x what your baseline is, or 37.78x. And this is just not the case. Improving 1% every day is not a possible thing. And so what this does, in my mind, is what a lot of self-help does, which is it overpromises and underdelivers. You just can't get 1% better at something every day. If you've never tried to improve at something, you can get 1% better on the first day, but almost every skill has diminishing marginal returns. And what I mean by that is, the first 100 hours you spend practicing chess. If you take someone with 0 hours of chess and someone with 100 hours of chess and you have them play each other, the 100-hour person is going to crush the 0-hour person, and it won't be close. But if you take someone with 100 hours and 200 hours, the margin will get smaller and smaller. That is to say that the marginal 100 hours, the second 100 hours, is not as useful for improving your skill as the first, and so on and so forth. So if you take someone with 10,000 hours and have them play someone with 10,100 hours, all other things equal, they'll probably draw most of their games. When the 1% improvement implies is that the guy with 1,100 hours should be considerably better. And this is just not the case. They're basically the same. And what it also implies is that, like, the person who was at, 100 hours and 0 hours should be relatively close because you just improve just, the same amount, the same, all the way through. Skill is, you have diminishing marginal returns on skill in any domain. And this, I can think of no counterexample where, the second 100 hours is more valuable than the first 100 hours. Sports, these types of things, in terms of improvement. And so to imply that, you are going to get increasing marginal returns, because when you have the 1%, 101%, you have compound interest. And he argues that there's a compound interest effect on improvement. And this is just not the case. However, I do think it's the case that your life can change, doing small changes. I think his overall message is correct in that small changes done consistently over time can produce tremendous results that are the types of results you might not have even thought possible. I just don't think it's the case that you improve 1% every day. And this is a sort of hyperbolic, in my mind, it's a hyperbolic type of thing. for a section of my book that I wrote, I talk about Hafthor Bjornsen, who deadlifted 500 kilos. And in my mind, there's nothing that is more clearly evident that you have diminishing marginal returns in any endeavor is it trying to get stronger and stronger. When you first start working out, you get what's called the newbie gains. You get very strong very quickly, and then suddenly it becomes very, very hard to put on, both either muscle or strength. And if Hafthor Bjornsen, who deadlifted 500 kilos, was able to, 37x over the time of a year, if he was able to improve 1% every day, he would be able to 38x the amount of weight he could lift, which it becomes roughly equivalent to lifting a bus. And this is just not the case. You can't get 1% stronger every day, but you can probably get 1% stronger just from the first day of lifting if you've never lifted before. And so, but I also think that the rewards you get in life for reaching the higher and higher tier of specialization and the greater and greater skill, even though you're getting diminishing returns in terms of how much effort it takes to get there, I think the rewards of life are increasing or tend to be increasing because life tends to reward the people who are at the very, very, very top. Hafthor Bjornsen being one of the strongest people alive, deadlifting 500 kilos, gets a lot of sponsorship deals and this sort of stuff. And the guys deadlifting 450 kilos don't get the same type of attention. Although Hafthor Bjornsen's an anomaly because he's also getting a bunch of sponsorship deals because he was on Game of Thrones. So perhaps a poor example, but the way our society is structured, we tend to reward the upper echelon outliers a lot more. And so in this sense, the rewards you get from acquiring more skill might have increasing marginal returns, but the actual acquisition of the skill itself, no. And so this is a criticism I have of a particular part of his book that I thought was worth mentioning in the context of, recently I talked about hustle porn and about how, a lot of people just encourage you to work harder and then they overpromise and underdeliver in terms of the substance of what they're saying. And I think that in a couple spots, James Clear, when arguing, with this sort of improve 1% every day type of thing, overpromises and underdelivers, or it's impossible to improve 1% a day. This is just, it's a nice heuristic or a nice way to think about. It's a nice cue. In weightlifting, you have, certain cues where you think about, an example of which might be what's a good one? Keeping your chest up. And so when you do the lift, you just think about keeping your chest up, right? A good cue for life or every approach every day is I want to be 1% better than I was yesterday. I think this is a good approach, a good philosophy, a good mindset, but I don't think it's practically speaking possible or even remotely close to the realm of possibility. And it's just, people who expect to 38x the results in the course of a year just by improving 1% every day, you just can't do it. But I digress. Back to the book, and let's get into the ratings. For utility, I gave it a 9. Scoring this on utility was a bit difficult. So here's the thing. I think that, or utility and novelty combined, I think is maybe perhaps an important to evaluate them together, because I think that what James Clear did was he aggregated a whole bunch of ideas from different places, and he organized them in a model that is very, very nice and very clear and very accessible and this sort of thing, which is why I think his book is so successful, because it's very easy to digest, and also I think he picks good information as well. There's not a lot of fat on the book, despite it also being easy. I think a lot of the ideas I've seen elsewhere, though. And so this is why the novelty and the utility is a bit difficult to rate together. The novelty, I think, for this book is in the organization. The organization looks a little like Chip and Dan Heath's Switch, which I think is another book, which is about change, which is kind of... there's kind of some similarities there. It seems to me that James Clear read Switch. It seems like he's read Tony Robbins. He kind of leans into that Tony Robbins' emotion model a bit. He's definitely read Viktor Frankl because he references him in the book. And so you can kind of see a whole bunch of self-help like literature and stuff and different ideas from different places in James Clear's writing, but I think that he presents it in a way that is unique and highly useful because it's highly efficient. Like, it's a very easy read, it's a very quick read. I think that he kind of captures the ideas well, he explains it, he doesn't spend too long on certain concepts, he summarizes at the end of chapters, he has visual aids to help you understand the ideas, which I think is tremendously useful and underused, in the space, or just all spaces in general. I think that all of this combined makes for it just being a very useful book, because you have to remember utility is a cross-section of both how useful are the ideas and also, how quickly can you read the book. A book that's like 1,000 pages that's like fantastic might score lower on utility. I almost gave it a 9.5. And for novelty, almost all of these ideas you can find somewhere else. The reason why I scored it high in novelty is because I find that this particular organization, in my estimation, as far as self-help goes, is generally speaking best. Although if you have specific issues, obviously more specific books to a specific thing I think are more useful. But I think habit formation in general is a good thing to approach or think about. For entertainment, I gave it a 5. It's just kind of medium. There's some things in there that are entertaining because they're somewhat interesting and this sort of thing, but nothing to write home about. For style, I gave it a 6. This is largely on the back of, I don't find his writing style particularly aesthetic, but this is on the back of, I think that he organizes the ideas well. He's clear. His name is Clear. And on this ground, I think that the style kind of gets a little bit of a bump, but if you were to offer me an opportunity to read James Clear's poetry, for example, or his literary writing, I would say, no thanks, I'm good. Which isn't to say he's a bad writer, but it's not something that stood out to me, so you get just a slightly above average score. For readability, he gave it an 8.5. I felt like he organized the ideas incredibly well. The only reason it wouldn't have scored higher is because I don't think the ideas are that difficult to begin with, so it's... I think that the people who, as a scoring system, if it's an idea that's kind of easy to present, your readability is both a cross-section of how easy or how more accessible you make your idea is how easy or more accessible you make your idea relative to how easy or accessible it actually is, and also just how readable and accessible it is just in a general sense in the abstract. Very easy, readable and accessible in the abstract, but I don't necessarily think he makes it way, way, way easier, but I do think it's one of the easier self-help books you could read, which is why I would so widely recommend it, even to people who have really high reading comprehension levels. And for interest, I gave it a 6. There's a bunch of interesting studies in there, and this is interesting, but in my mind, a lot of this information is covered in other areas. Specifically, I can see the influence from other books while reading it, which maybe is a bit unfair to James Clear, because this is kind of the case with all, knowledge, that it's built on the backs of other people. It's just me in particular, I've read a lot of the stuff that James Clear seems to have read going into this, and so although less stuff about habits specifically, I have not read The Zen of Habit or something like this, which he references in the back of the book, and there's another big book on habits, and so I'm not sure about that specifically, but again, overall score of 6.92, talking about habits, how to form them, very, very straightforward and also powerful information. I also think the improve 1% every day, even though I've expressed why I think that it's just in terms of what is actually describing improving 1% every day. I think that's a false type of thing, or it's an impossible task. But I think the cue or thinking of and approaching your life for improving 1% every day and being focused on, not on results, but on being focused on the process and the process of these tiny things, just really nailing down the tiny things. I think this is really good, and this is the crux of what's important in James Clear's book, and this is why I would really strongly recommend it in a general sense, in particular to people who don't read nonfiction a lot, or are just looking to get in the space, or I'm not sure, there's some sort of statistic, 40% or 60% a very large percentage of people, once they graduate, whatever their last schooling is, just never read another book. And if I think someone's kind of in that category, this is a book I would be very likely to, recommend, because again, there's a ton of visual aids. If I open to a random page, it's almost, there's a visual aid of some sort, and it's not like a tremendous thing, but just to help you conceptualize, maybe every 3-4 pages there's some sort of visual aid. And this perhaps is like a product of the fact that he is like largely a blogger, right? Or he came in from blogging, is kind of his more background, which is also why like stuff is digestible. He summarizes at the end, these sorts of things. And so I would recommend it broadly. Now, if someone reads a ton of nonfiction and they come to me and say, Peter, I'm looking for a book. And then I'm like, well, what type of book are you looking for? And they're like, self-help. And I'm like, what kind of self-help? And they're like, I don't know. I'd be like, you should try and get more specific. If someone I know doesn't read a lot, I would just, recommend this, generally speaking. If someone does read a lot and they read a lot of nonfiction, I'd be like, you should have a more specific request so I can give you a more specific recommendation, because I think that this is probably a good book in general, but it is a more general book. And so if you have a specific thing you wanted to tackle, this would be why I would like maybe omit from recommending this, although broadly speaking, I do recommend it. And it's, there are parts of it where I feel that, the self-help is showing a little bit, and I express that kind of with the 1% thing. And to that end, I would, if someone is trying to get a very... Self-help in general, right, is about selling a process, right? And so if they can sell you on the process and you engage in the process and the process gets you results. So there's like 3 parts of this, right? There is one, them getting you to drink the Kool-Aid and engage in their process, right? For James Clear, it's, this process of instituting new habits. And then there's 2, how effective is the process actually, which has independent from the sales of it. And then there's 3, your results, like specifically, or something like this. I forgot what I said for the 3rd. I did list 3, but really the point I'm trying to make is there's a bifurcation between how useful the ideas are really and how good the presentation of the ideas is. And what self-help does, in my mind, is they often try and really, really overpromise on the selling of the idea front, and tend to underdeliver in terms of how effective the ideas actually are. And this isn't necessarily bad, because I think that getting someone to start engaging in the process and get the ball moving, the 2-minute rule, to just get things started, as it were, this is an essential element of self-help. And so it creates this situation where overpromising might actually get you, thing 3, better results overall. So you have this, the system, which is like, the sales of the ideas, how effective the ideas themselves, and the results it gets you. And so you have to evaluate, when evaluating self-help, you have to do it in a whole, where there can be a sort of, idea or the presentation, right, which maybe it's the actual efficacy of the idea is not that good, but is really, really good at selling people and getting them to start, such that if you present people with this idea, they actually generally get really good results, even though the methodology is not that great. And so, it's this dynamic process where something can present a perfect methodology, but it's very measured and the sales of it aren't very good. And if this is the case, then people won't get good results on it because they won't try it, they won't implement it, and then it's worthless, right? Even if the ideas are very, very strong. And so self-help, in my mind, has to, navigate a sensitivity to both selling people on the idea and getting them to actually engage in whatever, intervention you are arguing is effective, and also try and represent the... you are incentivized to over-represent what type of results can be gotten from your intervention, and then balance this with actually having an effective intervention such that when the 2 are taken together, you produce maximally effective results. And I think, the 1% thing in this book is towards the front of the book. And what it's trying to get you is it's just trying to sell you on the idea. And then when he gets into the idea, I think his fidelity to what things are actually the case is much higher. And so I've perhaps spent too long on this 1% idea and, self-help in general, but I think the book is quite strong. Would highly recommend it. As far as discussion goes, does anyone here, or what are people's favorite self-help books and why? I think that this one is my favorite, although perhaps a close second is The 6 Pillars of Self-Esteem by Nathaniel Branden, because I think Nathaniel Branden's model is more novel and useful than, Clear's probably, but it's, a completely different thing, so they're not really comparable, and this might be my favorite overall in terms of the model presented, but I think James Clear presents his ideas much better, and because of this would be my most recommended or favorite, or favorite with a certain criteria where I'm understanding that presentation is an important element of a self-help book. So yep. Also feel free to comment, subscribe, do the YouTube algorithm stuff. It helps, and have a good day.